My mom yelled, "You have 48 hours to get your stuff out. That house is your sister's now." I didn't argue. I just stayed silent and prepared. 2 days later, when my sister walked in, she wished she had never stepped inside. Before we see what I did next, I have to ask, have you ever been the one doing all the work while someone else got all the credit? Drop a yes in the comments and let me know where you're watching from right now. I want to see who is with me. After my mother, Erin, hurled those words at me, they didn't bounce off the walls. They settled into the room like thick humidity, clinging to everything, suffocating and inescapable. 48 hours. That was the eviction notice for the life I had rebuilt with my own hands over 5 relentless years. My sister Kelsey needed the house, apparently. She needed it for wedding photos, for a curated bridal suite, for the soft, filtered life she broadcast to thousands of strangers who double-tapped her perfection. I stood in the foyer staring at the staircase banister I had stripped and refinished until my palms blistered. The custom crown molding I had driven across state lines to salvage from a demolition site. The hardwood floors I had paid to restore plank by plank. My father, Ryan, couldn't look at me. His gaze stayed fixed on those same floors, as if eye contact would make him complicit in what they were doing. This house wasn't some turnkey inheritance. It was a collapsing Victorian relic my grandmother Eleanor had left behind, like a curse wrapped in nostalgia. 5 years ago, it was days away from condemnation. The roof sagged inward, the foundation shifted like sand, the plumbing wheezed. The city had posted warnings. My parents didn't have the $165,000 required to stabilize it, so I found it. I was 24, barely launching my interior architecture firm, and I drained my savings without hesitation. I spent weekends scraping lead paint and evenings rewiring circuits instead of going on dates. I postponed vacations to fund a slate roof. I did it because my father had cried and said, "Haley, this will always be your home. You're preserving our legacy." I believed that promise like scripture. That was my flaw. I thought sweat equity translated to security. I thought sacrifice guaranteed belonging. But standing there while my mother impatiently tapped her wristwatch, waiting for me to disappear so she could start converting my bedroom into a bridal fantasy, I understood the truth. I hadn't secured a future. I had prepaid rent in a house that was never mine. In my family, affection always came with an invoice, and somehow I was the only one who ever paid it. My therapist calls it the invisible chain of survival. When you grow up as the optional child, you learn to compensate. You become indispensable. You fix, you fund, you anticipate. You overfunction because you believe usefulness equals love. I wired that $165,000 not just to rescue a building, but to cement my worth. If the house stood tall and flawless, maybe I would too. But Kelsey never had to prove anything. She simply existed, radiant and untouchable, the golden child influencer whose life was curated in soft light. She didn't repair foundations. She posed in front of them. I was the contractor behind the scenes. Now that the work was done and the house gleamed, my contract had ended. I was surplus inventory. "Fine," I said quietly. Even I was startled by how steady I sounded. 48 hours. My mother exhaled in visible relief, almost disappointed I hadn't given her the drama she could weaponize. "Make sure the guest room is cleared," she added briskly. "Kelsey wants her makeup station there." I walked upstairs on steps I had personally reinforced, each one solid beneath my weight because of me. Inside my bedroom, I closed the door and leaned against it. I didn't cry, I didn't rage. I sat on the edge of my bed and studied the vintage brass doorknob I had spent 3 obsessive weeks tracking down online to match the original 1890 fixtures. It gleamed in the afternoon light. It was exquisite, and legally it was mine. I opened my contacts and scrolled past moving companies. Instead, I called Mike, a specialist in architectural salvage I'd collaborated with on high-end restorations. "Hey," I said when he answered, "I need a full strip-out, rush timeline." Silence on the other end. "Everything?" he asked. "Everything," I replied. "If I purchased it, it leaves with me." The clock began its countdown. I moved through the house like a shadow. I packed my wardrobe quietly while my mother chattered downstairs about floral palettes and bridal themes. She never noticed the blue painter's tape I discreetly placed on items slated for removal. She didn't question the unmarked trucks pulling into the back alley. When the crew arrived, they worked with clinical precision. No smashing, no chaos, just careful detachment. The crystal chandelier in the dining room was lowered and crated. The marble slab atop the kitchen island was lifted cleanly away. The smart refrigerator and custom range were disconnected. Imported Italian fixtures were unscrewed and boxed. We removed the drapery rods, the bespoke curtains, the designer hardware, even the switch plates, even the dimmer panels. The antique doorknobs were replaced with hollow contractor-grade ones from the hardware store. By the hour 47, the house resembled its former condemned self: bare lighting, exposed wiring ports, scuffed walls where art once hung, echoes where warmth used to live. It wasn't vandalized, it was reverted. It looked like what it truly was without me, a structure, not a sanctuary. At the 48-hour mark, I stood once more in the foyer. The sconces were gone, leaving pale outlines behind. The floors looked flat without rugs softening their edges. The space felt cavernous and hollow like a body without breath. I placed the key gently on the floor. The metallic clink echoed louder than expected. Then I walked out. I got into my car and drove without checking the rearview mirror. I powered off my phone, but I could vividly imagine the scene unfolding hours later. Kelsey arriving with her bridal entourage, cameras poised for a reveal video, expecting curated elegance and stepping into stripped silence. I checked into a hotel across Savannah, ordered room service without guilt, and stood under a scalding shower that washed away 5 years of vigilance. For the first time, I didn't listen for pipes rattling or drafts creeping through windows. I slept. When I turned my phone back on, it vibrated violently with notifications. 17 missed calls from my mother, 12 from my father, 30 texts from Kelsey. I opened one. All caps. "You destroyed my aesthetic. This is insane. Fix it." Then my father's voicemail. His voice trembled with fury. "Haley, this is theft. You stole fixtures. You stripped value. I'm calling the police. You're going to prison if you don't return everything immediately." I replayed it calmly. Not once did they ask where I was staying. Not once did they ask if I was safe. Their outrage wasn't about losing me. It was about losing upgrades. They weren't grieving a daughter. They were furious their renovation package had expired. This is what normalized exploitation looks like. When you've been mined for so long, your absence feels like robbery to those who benefited. They believed entitlement was inheritance. They believed the house included lifetime service. They believed I came with a maintenance agreement. Well, the warranty had just expired. The next morning, a process server handed me a large envelope in the hotel lobby. My father wasn't bluffing. He was suing me. The document was thick, heavy with legal jargon: destruction of property, theft of fixtures, intentional infliction of emotional distress. He was claiming damages in excess of $200,000. I felt a moment of panic, a cold spike of fear in my chest. Did I go too far? I knew fixtures were legally considered part of the real estate once attached. Maybe I had crossed a line. Maybe my anger had just cost me my freedom. I called Grace. Grace wasn't just my best friend. She was a shark of a family law attorney who specialized in estate disputes. She had been my grandmother Eleanor's executed. "Meet me at the office," she said, her voice clipped. "Bring everything." I sat in her glass-walled conference room, the lawsuit sitting between us like a grenade. Grace flipped through it, her face unreadable. "This is a temper tantrum, Haley," she said finally. "He's throwing legal spaghetti at the wall, but we need to respond. Let's dig." We spent hours going through the old renovation paperwork, every receipt, every invoice, every permit. I had documentation for everything: the chandelier, the marble, the faucets. I had proof I paid for them. But Grace wasn't looking at the receipts. She was digging through the original transfer files from 5 years ago, when my grandmother died and my parents took over the property. She frowned, pulling out a dusty manila folder labeled simply 2019, Ryan, Legal. "Haley," she said slowly, tapping the file, "Do you remember the lawsuit your dad had back then? The supplier dispute?" I nodded. I remembered the tension in the house. He had been sued by a major material supplier for non-payment. He was terrified of losing everything: his business, his savings, the house. That was the excuse they used for why they couldn't pay for the renovations. They claimed their assets were frozen. Grace pulled out a document. It wasn't a receipt, it was a deed, a quick claim deed to hide the house from creditors, she said, looking at me over her glasses. Your parents signed this. They transferred the property fully to you. I stared at the paper. The memory came back in a rush. They had sat me down at the kitchen table, speaking in hushed tones. They told me it was just a formality, a temporary shield. They called it a tax shelter strategy. They said they were putting the house in my name to protect the family legacy, and that they would file the reversal paperwork as soon as the lawsuit was settled. Grace tapped the paper again. They never filed the reversal. Haley. What? They were too cheap, she said, a dry, humorless laugh escaping her lips. To transfer it back to themselves, they would have had to pay the transfer taxes and recording fees. They just didn't. They assumed you would never check. They assumed you would always be the good little daughter who did what she was told. She smiled, a sharp, dangerous smile that made me realize exactly why she was the best lawyer in Savannah. Legally, she said, you are not the tenant, you are not the contractor, you are the sole owner of that house. Your parents aren't landlords, they are squatters. I felt the room spin. The reality of it crashed into me. For 5 years, I hadn't been renovating their house, I had been renovating my house. They had been living in my house rent-free, acting like kings in a castle they didn't own. They had evicted me from my own property. The fear evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. Grace picked up her phone. Do you want to send a letter, or do you want to do this in person? I thought about Kelsey's wedding rehearsal. It was happening tomorrow morning. My mother had posted on Facebook that they were saving the day, hiring emergency stagers to make the empty house look presentable. They were determined to have their show. They were determined to win. In person, I said. The next morning, the Savannah sun was blazing. I pulled up to the house, my house. The driveway was full of cars. Caterers were unloading trays. A florist van was blocking the garage. A rental company was setting up white folding chairs on the lawn. My parents were on the porch, directing traffic, looking stressed but triumphant. They thought they had fixed the problem. They thought they had erased me. I didn't come alone. I parked my car and stepped out. Behind me, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up, lights flashing silently. 2 deputies got out, adjusting their belts. My father saw me first. He marched down the steps, his face turning a violent shade of purple. "You have some nerves showing up here," he shouted, his voice booming over the sound of the wind. "Get off my property before I have you arrested for trespassing." I kept walking. My heels clicked rhythmically on the pavement. I didn't stop until I was face to face with him. Kelsey ran out onto the porch, still in her silk bride robe, a glass of champagne in her hand. "Get her out of here, Dad! She's trying to ruin my day again!" I looked at my father. I looked at my mother, who was standing behind him, arms crossed, looking at me with pure disgust. "You can't kick us out, Haley," my father spat, pointing a finger in my face. "I bought this place. I own it." I reached into my bag and pulled out the certified copy of the quick claim deed. I held it up, the paper crisp in the humid air. "No, Dad," I said. My voice was low, steady. "You didn't. You hid this place. You hid it to save your own skin because you didn't want to pay your debts and you were too cheap to take it back." I handed him the document. He looked at it. I saw his eyes scan the page. I saw the moment the air left his lungs. He saw his own signature, the date, the notary stamp, the undeniable truth of his own greed. "This house is mine," I said. "It has been mine for 5 years. You are trespassing, and I want you out now." The deputy stepped forward. "Sir, is this your signature?" one of them asked, gesturing to the paper. My father sputtered. We had an agreement. It was a tax thing." "Is this your signature?" the deputy repeated, his hand resting on his belt. "Yes," my father whispered. "Then you need to vacate the premises," the deputy said. "The owner has requested your removal." My mother started screaming. It wasn't a cry of sorrow, it was the shriek of someone losing control. "This is a misunderstanding. We are her parents. You can't do this." I looked at her, the woman who gave me 48 hours to leave, the woman who replaced me without a second thought. "You have 48 minutes," I said. "Get your things, get your guests, and get out." The wedding was canceled. Well, not canceled, it was moved to a motel banquet hall out by the highway. I heard the lighting was terrible. I didn't keep the house. I couldn't. The memories were too tainted. The walls held too many echoes of my own desperation. I sold it as is. Even stripped, the market was hot, and the structural work I had done added massive value. I made a significant profit. I used that capital to launch my own boutique architecture firm. I named it Eleanor Design, after the only person in that family who had ever loved me without conditions. My parents tried to sue me again, claiming fraud. It didn't go anywhere. The paper trail was too clean. They ended up in a small apartment, their reputation in ruins, their finances exposed. Kelsey stopped speaking to me, which was honestly the best wedding gift she could have given me. I sat in my new office looking out at the Savannah skyline. I was no longer the fixer, I was the builder. I had cut the cord, and for the first time, I wasn't afraid of falling. I had built a new foundation, one they could never touch. This is the justice of the sewer. The best revenge wasn't the eviction, it wasn't the humiliation. It was taking the resources they tried to steal and using them to plant a garden they could never burn down. If you have ever had to burn a bridge to save yourself, share this story and tell me in the comments what was the moment you finally said enough.